So thank you all for coming. This is an important topic. I'm really pleased to be up here today. We're going to be talking about methamphetamine use among gay men. And it's my honor to introduce the Grand Round speaker, Dr. Petros Levounis. He's professor and chair of the Department of Psychiatry at Rutgers Medical School. He's also the chief of service at University Hospital in Newark. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his background. He graduated from Stanford, where he double majored in chemistry and biophysics. Now, I actually did not know that until I saw his CV, but I was not completely surprised because I heard him give a talk just about a week or two ago on club drugs, and he seemed entirely too comfortable with molecular structure and carbon bonds. Anyway, so now I know why. Then he got his medical education. He got his MD at the Medical College of Pennsylvania, a master's in sociology from Stanford, and then he came east to New York. He did his residency at Columbia, and then did an addiction fellowship at NYU under Mark Gallanter. Soon after, he joined the faculty at NYU and then the faculty at Columbia, where he was the director of addiction services at St. Luke's and Roosevelt Hospital until 2013 when he moved to become chair at Rutgers. So Dr. Levounis is very well known for his work in addiction, his work on education. He's authored many manuscripts, but more importantly, many books, co-authored, authored, edited, co-edited them. He's also been a great ambassador for addiction in both the professional world, because he's active at the APA, at ASAM, American Society of Addiction Medicine, at AAAP, American Academy of Addiction Psychiatry, but also to the lay world, where he's been interviewed by a number of media outlets, the ones that you recognize, CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox, but also the Martha Stewart radio show, which must have been interesting.
Highlight of my career.
Maybe he'll tell us a little about that. He's won a number of awards, most notably those for education, the Nancy Roski, I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, Excellence in Medical Student Education, and the Irma Bland Award for Excellence in Teaching Residents. Now, that's what you know from him from reading his CV. I'm just going to mention a couple other things. First, he's been a really great mentor to junior faculty. And what's interesting is it's not just those faculty that are at the institution where he resides. He's reached out across the country, and I know this because he's mentored faculty here at Yale. They include Carla Marienfeld, who unfortunately recently left for UCSD, Bashar Arnaut, who fortunately is still with us and hopefully not going anywhere, Noah Capurso, among others. And so we at Yale have benefited from his mentorship. The other thing is that I know him from AAAP, American Academy of Addiction Psychiatry, where he's known for his oratory skills. He does a mean auction, if anybody's interested in finding someone to mediate that. And he also is the founder, or should I say instigator, of the after-hours soiree for the trainees. So he's really mentored them in a lot of different ways. And then finally, of course, he's a fellow Hellene. And so when else at Grand Rounds do I get to say welcome and kalosorisis? So.
Thank you very much, Ismini. It's certainly a privilege to be giving Grand Rounds at Yale and to be invited by Ismini. We've gone way back at AAAP and other venues. And above and beyond my incredible respect that I have for her, it's also a delight to go into a room and start rapping in Greek and have somebody who gets it right away. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for coming to this lecture. Also, I want to acknowledge Bashar Arnaut, who have collaborated on several topics before. And we just finished the second edition of our textbook on motivational interviewing coming out in January. And that concludes the promotional part of the talk. So, okay. So today we're going to be talking about Grindr and much more importantly about crystal methamphetamine among gay men. And let me see. The way I would like to go about this, let me see if I can just do like this somewhere here. Yeah, something like that. Is first some general ideas about addiction and sexuality, and then move on to the basics of a few words about drugs of abuse outside of crystal methamphetamine. Crystal, Christina, Tina. Tina is the nickname of crystal methamphetamine in the gay community. Then go on the basics of crystal methamphetamine before moving on to how people use it, and then that's where the apps come in, and of course moving on to treatments and prevention. At the very end, say a few words about a couple of new constructs in psychiatry along the lines of the behavioral addictions, sex addiction and love addiction. All right, so let's start with the lay of the land. Way back, people felt that LGBT people have increased risks of substance use disorders because they were using to augment a hyperactive, restless lifestyle and exaggerated need for self-sufficiency. Quite robust language there, and quite homophobic actually. And here is the evidence of this lifestyle. The findings of sports and sports who extensively studied the psychosocial characteristics of 9 representative cocaine addicts are largely consistent with these clinical descriptions. And I have tried very hard to find any other evidence for this idea of the exaggerated need for self-sufficiency that Keynesian proposed in 1979, and all comes back to these 9 subjects that they were extensively interviewed, God knows how and under what circumstances. So we have moved away from those days, and the way we explain the increased risk of substance use disorders in LGBT communities has much more to do with flat-out discrimination and the stress that results from this kind of discrimination, the real or perceived homophobia and the discrimination that people expect to have even though they may or may not actually receive that kind of discrimination. And finally, of course, the self-loathing, the internalized homophobia that has been quite well described in LGBT literature. Not only other people discriminating against us, but us hating ourselves because we have learned to hate ourselves from this kind of socialization. Okay, just a couple of things on a nomenclature. Sexuality and gender, 2 different concepts. I'm sure I'm preaching to the already converted here. People know about these things, but let's just put them all in perspective. Gender is very much broken down these days in terms of the biological sex, the chromosomal makeup of a person, identity, how you identify yourself, and then of course the expression, how you dress, how you interact with the people around you. And that's for the gender side of this diagram here. You can think of it in some kind of biopsychosocial way as well, sex being more biological, identity being somewhat more psychological, and expression being much more of a social expression of gender. So in a somewhat similar fashion, we have on the sexual orientation, which is something rather different than gender, we can break it down in 3 different components. Attraction, which is something that is somewhat more kind of intrinsic to the person and can best possibly be approximated by dreaming, by masturbation, by this kind of ideas. It's the Kinsey scale of not being just black and white, but having a whole spectrum of sexuality, from being attracted fully to members of the same sex to being attracted fully to members of the opposite sex. Then it's a matter of identity. Do I see myself as gay, straight, bisexual, or neither? And then, of course, there is behavior, which is, again, something that's different, having to do whom do I sleep with? Do I sleep with men, women, both, or neither? And in a traditional sense, these 3 dimensions of sexual orientation very often are kind of go hand in hand, but in other situations, as you very well know, they don't. We have several men who may identify themselves as straight. Behaviorally, they're bisexual. They sleep with both men and women, and their internal attraction is much more gay than straight. All right. The majority of studies that have addressed sexuality and substance use disorders either talk about identity or behavior, or at best both. And it's really one major study, which is now a little old. It's a 10-year-plus old study, the Nizark study, that did address all 3 components of sexuality, attraction, identity, and behavior, and continues to be one of the major studies in our field. So what did this study find? So first of all, the most straightforward one, in terms of identity, gay men and women. On the left-hand side of this diagram here, we have women. On the right, we have men. For the next 3 slides, both men and women seem to behave in a similar fashion. So we can just look at the left-hand side, and it's pretty much the same for the right. So gay men and bisexuals have a higher rate of substance use disorders. On the y-axis, there is some kind of measure of substance use than people who identify themselves as heterosexual. In terms of sexual behavior, people who sleep both with men and women seem to be at a higher risk of substance use disorders. And very interestingly here, the white bars are people who do not sleep with anybody. And it seems that it's somewhat of a protective factor against addiction to just say, forget it, I'm not doing this, I'm good, I'm fine. I'm not advocating for it, but here it is, and the data suggests that. And finally, probably one of the most interesting results of this analysis by Sean McCabe has been the analysis of attraction. So what we see here is the following. Here we have people who are completely gay. Here are people who are completely straight. Do people hear me in the back like this? You're fine? Okay. So these are the straights, these are the gays, these are the bisexuals. And here we have this Kinsey-like people who are almost gay but not exclusively, and almost straight but not exclusively. And they seem to be at the highest risk of substance use disorders. Now, this does have clinical implications because, as you very well have learned about addiction, we all go rah-rah-rah for cognitive behavioral therapy and motivational interviewing and perhaps dialectical behavioral therapy, and we kind of put aside psychodynamics, and we think that psychoanalysis and psychodynamics have been more trouble than good when it comes to addiction treatment. And there's very good evidence that, yes, that was the case back in the 50s and the 60s. But when it comes to this data, there is a possibility here that psychodynamic psychotherapy may be the tool that will help people who are more straddling these categories either continue to be in that kind of in-between state or resolve it or somehow address a much more intrapsychic struggle than what CBT and motivational interviewing and the other psychotherapies suggest or are able to support. Finally, this is some of our own data. This is a study that we did on Match.com. And we analyzed over 16,000 personal ads. And we specifically asked, what about smoking? Who is motivated to quit smoking? And then here we have men seeking women. So these are the straight men, and about 21% of them were motivated to quit smoking. All the people here are heavy smokers. So among heavy smokers, who is motivated to quit smoking? So we found 21% of the straight men want to quit smoking. About 21% of the gay men were motivated to quit smoking. About 20% of the straight women were motivated to quit smoking. And look at that. Lesbians had only about 15% of them who were interested in quit smoking. We don't really know what to make of that, but it's a new line of research that is based on big data. We work very much, my department works very closely with the computer science department who do big data studies on depression and so on. And now we are trying to take some of this technology and apply it to social media, to dating sites, and see what we can find from thousands and thousands of subjects rather than just a small number of individuals that we used to survey before. As far as this particular study goes here, there is one suggestion that perhaps lesbians are more comfortable or more accepting of their circumstances themselves, whatever it is, much more than straight men, straight women, and gay men. For example, in terms of, there's a San Francisco study that suggests that lesbians may be heavier than heterosexual women, but they are much more accepting of their body habitus than heterosexual women. So it could be good or bad. Again, in this particular situation, it's bad because you continue smoking, but there may be a component of the lesbian culture that is much more accepting, whatever that is, than, let's say, the other three groups here. And this technology of big data has a promise of helping us start understanding addiction and sexuality in a rather sophisticated manner. I also should say that this collection of the data, the analysis took a little longer, but the collection of the data of 16,000 people took 4 hours. You just go on the internet, you click a button, and you just ask how many hits do I get if I'm a gay guy looking for another guy, and boom, it tells you, and then you have, everything is categorical. It tells you whether you're motivated to quit or not, and you can just go from there. Unfortunately, very recently, there are some kind of legal humps to the idea, and I have two very enthusiastic residents working on the legalities of this whole issue and perhaps partnering with some of these companies and allowing us very formally and kind of legally use their data. OkCupid does a lot of work with researchers. Okay, so very, very briefly, the world before Tina, when people would talk about drugs of abuse in LGBT communities, they would think about the classic club drugs, which would be ecstasy, which is having a comeback now under Molly, which is just very pure methylene dioxymethamphetamine. And here it is, the little pills, beautiful pictures to attract the younger population. GHB, gamma hydroxybutyrate, or G, as it is often called, which is a rather dangerous drug with a very, very small therapeutic window and idiosyncratic metabolism that everybody should know about. And here it is. It's like a pure ecstasy, and it's a very sexual drug, not just sensual like MDMA. And finally, ketamine, which I'm sure you have heard a lot about because of its potential in the treatment of depression. It is certainly also a drug of abuse in the gay community. We've had several patients who abuse ketamine, and the good thing about ketamine is that it does have a very large therapeutic window, and we don't see overdoses with ketamine quite as much. We see accidents because you have distortion of time and space, but we don't see overdoses in a classic sense that we see, let's say, with G. And that's pretty much how we used to think about drugs in the gay community: ecstasy, G, and ketamine. And then crystal methamphetamine came to town about 15 years ago in a big way. And I know that you don't see it quite as much in New Haven, but certainly in New York City, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, we do have quite a significant problem with crystal methamphetamine in the gay male community. Here it is, up close and personal. Very often it has this pinkish hue, which is due to the phosphorus, which is a catalyst in the preparation of crystal meth. Ismini, I had to show the structure here. I couldn't possibly not do that. A classic phenethylamine. Whenever you see an aromatic ring separated from the amino group by 2 carbons, immediately think about psychoactive properties. This is a phenethylamine, the classic one. This is methamphetamine because it's a secondary nitrogen here. You do have a methyl group sticking out there. Just remember how closely it reminds us of epinephrine, which is pretty much the same molecule with the loss of a methyl group here and some hydroxy groups all around. And of course, look at how incredibly similar it is to pseudoephedrine. This is pseudoephedrine here, and this is crystal. So I'm not divulging anything here. Anybody from basic organic chemistry, you dehydrate this hydroxy group with a hydrogen here, you make a double bond, you hydrogenate the double bond, and boom, you have crystal meth. The recipes are all over the internet. I'm not getting myself in trouble by telling you how to do it. It's a very, very, very simple process. And here is a crystal meth lab. We have found crystal meth labs in New York City hotel rooms, but the major workhorse of crystal meth for the longest time had been in the south, southwest, and northwest of the country, people having garages, people having trailers, and being able to manufacture crystal methamphetamine. You buy pseudoephedrine from the pharmacy now. Of course, there are more regulations around it, but you can still find pseudoephedrine, and you can make it into crystal meth. In 2016, the majority of crystal meth that comes to the United States comes from super labs from India and Mexico, and so they have superseded these homegrown labs in garages and trailers that we used to see in California and Oregon. All right, what does crystal meth do to the brain? The addiction psychiatrists in this room here have seen these graphs before. Nora Volkov, the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, makes sure to remind us about them. So we think about the dopaminergic spikes at the nucleus accumbens. And here are two of the natural rewarding agents, food and sex. You think about your own dopamine level at nothing too good is happening, nothing too bad is happening. It's about 100%. If you had an amazing meal, not just the little muffins that we had for breakfast, but really an amazing thing, you jump to about 150% of your baseline, and then, you know, sex will do twice the job of food and will jump into about 200% of its baseline. The classic rewarding agents. Drugs of abuse hijack the pleasure-reward pathways of the brain, hijack the mesolimbic system, and out of 30 million chemicals that we have identified in all of the universe, there are about 250 of them who have the ability to go at the nucleus accumbens and activate the system in a way very, very similar to sex. They just jump the dopamine level to about 200 and 250% of the baseline. Cocaine does a little better job than that, has that extra punch of cocaine, and goes over 300% of the baseline. Okay, we all know that, we appreciate that. Here's the amphetamines, and the methamphetamines may be even higher than the amphetamines. Look at the y-axis, over 1,000% of the baseline. It's a nuclear weapon compared to the conventional weapons of all the other drugs of abuse. And this has clinical implications, because before crystal methamphetamine came to town, big part of addiction treatment was to convince the patient, either explicitly or implicitly, that life in sobriety will be as exciting, if not more exciting, than it was when they were drinking and drugging. You can't possibly look a crystal methamphetamine addict in the eye and say, trust me, sex in sobriety will be as exciting, if not more exciting, than it was when you were high on crystal methamphetamine. They will immediately know that you haven't used the drug, that you don't know what you're talking about, and they will discredit you. So we have devised different ways of talking to our patients. We don't talk about this promised land anymore. We talk much more about trade-offs. Sure, you will not have this amazing sex again, but perhaps you may want to keep your teeth, or you may want to keep, I don't know, your life, or maybe you want to keep your children. Things that may have meaning for you outside of this incredible experience that you had with crystal methamphetamine. And that's how we do it these days. All right. Moving on to using crystal meth. This is an ad that Peter Staley, has anybody seen the movie How to Survive a Plague? Or the book just came out of How to Survive a Plague. It's about HIV and the early days of AIDS. And Peter Staley was this great, he was a Wall Street guy. He was making lots and lots of money in Wall Street, and then he became an activist for HIV and managed to do some great things in terms of the ACT UP and the earlier parts of the AIDS epidemic. And then, in 2000, he just realized, okay, we did what we did with the AIDS, we have the protease inhibitors, we have somewhat managed the epidemic, and all of a sudden, crystal methamphetamine is the new agent that has hit the gay community, and the people are seroconverting all over again because of crystal meth. And so he put on his own money and put these ads, these posters, these life-size posters all over New York, especially in the gay areas. And it said, huge sale, buy crystal, get HIV free, which was the first kind of a major alert that there is a connection between crystal methamphetamine used in the gay community and HIV seroconversion. So how does that work? By 2000, 2002, pretty much everybody knew about safer sex. There were condoms everywhere. This was the days before PrEP and PEP. So really condoms was the only thing that we had against the epidemic. And people knew that, but then they would get high on crystal methamphetamine. Inhibitions would go out the window. Safe sex guidelines would go out the window and engage in unsafe sex and end up with HIV. Crystal meth is the turbo cocaine. Everything that you know about cocaine, crystal meth does bigger and better. The high is much, much bigger. The sexual interest is bigger. Everything is just tremendously kind of bumped up than what you know about a classic stimulant like cocaine. Also the withdrawal is deeper than the cocaine withdrawal. It's longer lasting than the cocaine withdrawal. You get the terrible Tuesdays of crystal methamphetamine. Cocaine, you do it over the weekend, boom, you can go back to work on Monday morning. Not so much with crystal methamphetamine. And that's perhaps another reason why it caught up much more in the West than the East. It's a little kind of, I'm not quite, yeah, exactly. We're talking about that with Mike, about the difference between New York and California. But it is striking how a drug that becomes popular in New York immediately becomes popular in California and vice versa, with the exception of crystal methamphetamine. It took a long time for crystal meth to come from the West to the East, and it only still is within the gay communities. It hasn't really expanded to the general population, which is pretty striking. Anyway, I'm digressing here. So, you get high with crystal methamphetamine, your inhibitions are going out the window, and there's another extremely unique effect of crystal methamphetamine that I have found in several of my patients. And that is the following. You look yourself in the mirror, and you're not hallucinating, you see yourself as it is, but everything's a little better. You're slimmer, you're more muscular, your penis is longer, you're more beautiful, whatever it is that you want to be, everything looks better. And that gives you the confidence that you may have been lacking, and you go out there and you socialize and you engage in more romantic or sexual activities, and you may end up with an increased risk of HIV. Now, there is a built-in protective mechanism in crystal methamphetamine. This is a euphemism here. It's exactly the opposite. You get incredibly sexual with crystal methamphetamine. You want to have sex, but at the same time you get sexual dysfunction, which in a way cuts down on the transmission rates. Back in the early 2000s, the whole idea in the gay community of who's top, who's bottom was really very, very prominent, because if you were on crystal methamphetamine, you really could only perform the bottom position much, much more, let's say, than the top position because of the erectile dysfunction. Enter the erectile dysfunction agents, sildenafil and the like, and that protective mechanism goes out the window, and then people feel we saw the second kind of wave of HIV transmission in the gay community, where you get high with crystal meth, you can all ready to go, you can pop a sildenafil pill, and therefore then you can do whatever you want and increase the risk of HIV. I see several people out there standing. There are plenty of rooms here in the front if you guys want to come in, or not, or yeah. Because I feel bad I don't use the microphone, so I have to project even further out. So if you can come in, that'd be great. Okay. So that's what was going on in the early 2000s. And then in the mid-2000s, the late 2000s, we start seeing the perfect storm of crystal meth, sex, and the internet. Crystal meth, sex, and the internet. And both drugs and sex were just very, very easily available to people. And most of us felt and continue to feel that the major problem there was access, that it was increase the access to both sexual partners and drugs of abuse. Steve Lee, who's a wonderful researcher from Colombia and has written the textbook on overcoming crystal methamphetamine addiction, had a different theory. And he said, no, it's exactly the opposite. If you are on the internet trying to hook up, your life is a life of rejection. No matter how good looking you are, no matter what it is, there are only 24 hours in a day. So you see all these images and you see all these guys and you constantly do not hook up. And then only occasionally you have one event that is rare, that is unpredictable, that's invariable. And that classic variable intermittent reinforcement is what perpetuates the behavior. And that's what makes it so difficult to extinguish. Which is an interesting concept, that the reduction in this behavior may be what fuels it even more so. All right, this was one of the first internet sites. That's where we advertised. We had the Crystal Clear project when I was at the Addiction Institute of New York, and that's where we did our advertisements, manhunt.net. You can go to YouTube and you can find very step-by-step instructions on how to inject crystal methamphetamine. Crystal methamphetamine in 2016 has moved clearly on the intravenous route and has gone underground. When you look at the statistics, and I'm going to show some of the statistics later, they seem to have somewhat stabilized, if not gone better. But then a lot of people feel that we have driven the addiction underground because it's not cool anymore to be high on crystal methamphetamine, and people have gone to the more severe form of the illness and they use intravenously. Here's the data that I was talking to you about. This is 2014 here, and as things were coming down in the late 2000s, now we see that things may be coming up again. This is Los Angeles, the only one that continues to go down. Both San Francisco and New York City seem to have a resurgence of crystal methamphetamine. And one possible explanation for this resurgence of crystal methamphetamine is the apps. And finally, we do get to the title of the talk. Here we go. Here is Grindr. For the one or two people in the audience who may not know what Grindr is a GPS-based app on your phone so that you can walk down College or Temple and you can just see if somebody else is also on Grindr, and you can exchange pics and you can exchange vital signs of different sorts and see if you match or not, and just go at it and meet the person and take it from there. An incredibly effective way of finding sexual partners. So this is the founder of Grindr, Joel, and this is his page. It's a very demure page compared to a lot of other Grindr pages. 34 years old, he gives how tall you are, how much you weigh, single, what you're looking for, and you get the information. And then there are several layers in these apps of allowing somebody to see more pics and less pics of yours, and you have the public images and the more private ones. And this is what we hypothesize may be at the core of the new wave of the crystal methamphetamine epidemic as we see it today. Blender was the lesbian app. It failed. We have no idea. This is, again, this kind of differences among straight men, straight women, gay women that we don't fully understand. But lesbians did not really take to Blender, and then Blender transformed and became a straight app and is doing quite well now. Social network, there are plenty of different apps now. Scruff, Tumblr, Adam, OkCupid that I mentioned before, Tinder that a lot of you know, and amazingly enough, and I really cannot wrap my head around that very well, the latest in this whole world is gay men finding sexual partners in the straight apps. the apps that they are really catering to straight men and women. And again, I don't fully understand that part. And if you think that this is a different skull and bones society that is just in its own world and has nothing to do with the rest of us, think again. This is a Starbucks in the background here. I just noticed that. This is a city bus in New York City, in Chelsea, and this is an ad for a berry drink. And look at that. Your taste buds will always swipe right. Your taste buds will always swipe right, which is straight from these apps. When you do swipe right, if you like somebody, you swipe left if you don't like somebody. So this kind of world has become a part of our everyday life in 2016. Okay, moving on to a few words about treatments. Again, the addiction psychiatrists in this room have seen these photographs from Nora Volkow. This is the good old Nancy Reagan frying pan idea. This is your normal brain, and then you're a methamphetamine addict. You lose the colors of life, both literally and metaphorically. And we used to think that once you fry those areas, you are done. And thank God in 2016 we do feel much better. We do feel that with abstinence the colors do come back, and we do have a significant repair of whatever damage was done with crystal methamphetamine, although not fully. So this is still the neurotoxicity of methamphetamine is still something that's quite highly debated. All right, in terms of treatment, the prominent treatment today is the matrix model, pioneered at UCSF, and what the matrix model is essentially the kitchen sink. Everything that we have known that may work in addiction treatment, let's put them all together and hope for the best. And that's exactly what we do. Group psychotherapy, individual psychotherapy, family, contingency management, CMA. Crystal methamphetamine anonymous is not particularly helpful in my experience. I send my patients to crystal methamphetamine anonymous, and they treat it more as a dating opportunity, a meeting more than anything else. So I'm not very happy with CMA. I would send them to AA, which is very open, at least in New York, and they do accept patients from all kinds of walks of life. And of course, treatment of co-occurring psychiatric disorders. All these different treatments bathed in a gay affirmative environment where you're not judgmental about people's behaviors and you just support them in all the ways that we know how. Interestingly, when I was at the Addiction Institute of New York and we had our crystal methamphetamine groups, one complaint that we got was from the general groups that we had, the general addiction groups. It said that you have siphoned away the gays from us and you've put them in these separate groups for crystal meth, and you have impoverished the general addiction groups, which I thought it was kind of cute and kind of nice for the gays. All right. Contingency management, I'm not sure how much contingency management you do here in your programs. A rather effective intervention for stimulants, both cocaine and crystal methamphetamine. A little more difficult to put together than it sounds, having good records, having the urine toxicology. Basically, you give vouchers for negative urines. That's the classic contingency management. Somebody does well, they have negative urine, you give them a reward, or you give them a chance for a reward. And it's quite effective, but logistically somewhat complex. We published some ideas about psychotherapy with gay men, and the way that we have analyzed that is in terms of the dyad. What are the major themes that emerge if the patient is gay and the therapist is gay, or the patient is gay and the therapist is straight, all the four permutations there. The one that I find most fascinating is this one right here, when you have a gay patient with a gay therapist. And there's a little bit of a trade-off there. On one hand, you do have increased rapport. There's this kind of understanding that people have, very much like a therapist who has grandchildren and a patient who has grandchildren, and they can somewhat understand each other in terms of that commonality. But there is also a price to pay for that in terms of over-identification. And I have found that in my own life as a therapist. You tend to cut corners a little bit easier. I'm taking an example from another world. Greek patient comes in, and she starts saying, well, you know, when I grew up in the Greek Orthodox Church, and you know what the Greek Orthodox Church is all about. It's very, very tempting for me to just say, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, let's move on. Meanwhile, her experience in the Greek Orthodox Church may be vastly different than my experience in the Greek Orthodox Church, and a missed opportunity to understand your patient because of that over-identification and rapport. There are several people who are studying now the matching and whether matching patients with therapists is a good idea or not. In terms of my crystal methamphetamine patients who are gay, I have found this to be somewhat of a trade-off. And finally, a few words about prevention. The first campaign that we did for crystal methamphetamine was a primary prevention effort, which was essentially the scare tactics. We put up these posters, and we very much in the tradition of tobacco primary prevention, the scare tactics, getting people to say, I'm going to end up being like this guy here and not do it. It was rather successful, and we're very happy with ourselves. And then we moved to the second wave of campaigns, and that was a secondary prevention effort, which essentially we're telling our patients, we're telling people who already were using crystal methamphetamine, you know what? You can be crystal-free and sexy. You can do that. Just come to us for treatment, or if you don't want to do that, go to CMA or sheer willpower alone, whatever it is. It wasn't really an advertisement for our services, but you can be crystal-free and sexy. And we put this handsome man in all kinds of internet and periodicals and the like. At which point we got a huge backlash from the community who came to us and said, are you guys insane? What are you doing there? You're showing these pictures up to the young generation, and all they hear is, ooh, great, I can have all the crystal methamphetamine I want, and then I will just stop and I will come back and I will be as beautiful as these people. At which point we took down the campaign, and I'm very glad, of course, that we did. It is somewhat similar to the idea of the celebrities who want to go back to high schools and tell the kids, I was a cocaine addict, and it was a terrible life. It was the worst part of my career, and I stopped, and now I am clean, and life is wonderful, and I want to give that message to you. Terrible idea, terrible idea. Unless the celebrity has teeth falling out of their mouth and being absolutely horrific looking, the kids get the exact opposite message. They think that this is the ticket to fame, riches, celebrity, all the wonderful things in life. So we have to be very careful with secondary campaigns when, of course, you are also hitting primary audiences. And finally, this is a full-page ad that we put in the New York Times, Gay Men and Crystal Meth, a manifesto where we decried the epidemic of crystal meth, and it was signed by a number of prominent New Yorkers here. Here I am myself, from the director of the Addiction Institute of New York, sandwiched between Amanda Lepore, a transsexual performer, and Michael Lucas, president of the Lucas Entertainment, which is probably the best known gay porn industry that we know. So, Mom, I have arrived. Here I am. I lecture at Yale, and I am right here with Amanda Lepore and Michael Lucas. All right. Couple of words about sex addiction and love addiction. I think that pretty much everything I've said so far is rather evidence-based. What I'm about to say now is not. It's just conjecture. It's something that we're kind of thinking. As you know, the DSM-5 opened the door to the behavioral addictions by taking gambling disorder in the same chapter as the substance use disorders and calling it substance use disorders and addictive disorders all in one. Internet gaming is also in the DSM-5, but it's in the section 3 or C, what is it? 3, I think, where it is these disorders that need a little more evidence before they can ascend and become part of the real DSM. Here are 12 of those behavioral addictions. Of course, gambling is the only one that is, it's our marquee behavioral addiction because it's fully vetted and fully sanctioned by the APA. But there are a number of other ones that I'm sure kind of raise an eyebrow to you. Is it really work addiction? Do we really have love addiction? I tell you, in 2004, the American Association of Dermatologists, Academy or Association of Dermatologists, came up with the idea that sun tanning is an addiction. It has totally a potential of becoming as much an addiction as heroin and cocaine and alcohol and everything else. And they put down what they see and what the criteria were at the time from the substance use disorders of the DSM, and they said there is a full concordance, and so we do believe that sun tanning can become an addiction. I was irate. I thought that this was terrible. I went to the national media, I did the morning shows. I said that this is a disgrace. We're trivializing the struggles of people who really have to face addiction, and pretty soon we're going to be calling a bad hair day an addiction, and this is terrible. And I've had a change of heart. I think 10 years later, or 12 years later, I have to say that they are much messier than, let's say, tobacco addiction or alcohol addiction, where we kind of see who's an addict and who's not. But that doesn't mean that they're not true. So this is the area of great interest in addiction medicine and great promise. The two that are most relevant, of course, to what we've been talking about today is the sex addiction and the love addiction. The sex addiction came very, very close to being part of the DSM-5 under hypersexual disorder. And there were a lot of debate back and forth, and at some point they decided to include it in the DSM-5, and then decided not to, and then they thought of putting it on section 3 of the DSM-5, and the final decision was to just take it all out. There wasn't enough hard evidence to include it in our book. So, however, there are all kinds of societies and people who do study sexual addiction, and here's a proposed list of criteria for sexual addiction: a condition characterized by repetitive, out of control, driven sexual behavior, typically conducted with strangers. The 4 pillars of sexual addiction, which of course then, this is so classic here, every disorder in the DSM will have to result in distress or dysfunction or both. That's something that permeates the entire DSM. Our interest in the behavioral addictions did come out of the crystal methamphetamine epidemic, because we found that a lot of the men who were treating for crystal meth also suffered from comorbid hypersexual disorder or sex addiction, and so we had to get a crash course on sex addiction to be able to treat our patients. Another disorder which is even more tenuous and more controversial is the idea of a love addiction. People who either are in the attraction phase or the attachment phase, either they want to make sure that they are liked, and they keep on going through the apps to make sure that people hit on them and they're attractive enough, or that they go through relationships for a sense of security and continuity, where they go one after another in their relationships. The way that I see it is that this is the bread and butter of psychiatry for the past 100 years or so. We see patients all the time who either want to get married or want to get divorced, and we try to help them in one way or another. But I have to appreciate that there is a little different angle if you think about it as an addiction, which may be helpful to some patients. How much it maps to the neurobiology of addiction in terms of the hijacking of the pleasure-reward pathways of the brain and the nucleus accumbens and the hippocampus, and I'm not quite sure. But it's certainly something that is being proposed. All right. In conclusion, 5 things that I would like you to remember from today, if you can. LGBT people are at highest risk of high risk of substance use disorders, although remember those very interesting bars of the people who are almost gay and almost straight who may be at the highest risk of addiction. Crystal methamphetamine has a deadly intersection with the 21st century technology, the internet, and in 2016 primarily the apps, Grindr and its surrogates. In terms of treatment, you do need to create a gay affirmative environment, not just a gay tolerant or a gay accepting. This is a transition from gay tolerance, which was the mantra and the goal maybe 10, 15 years ago. We went to gay accepting, and now we have moved to gay affirming, which you can just kind of let the language sink for a minute. It is even more and more actively engaging the gay person in her or his life. If you're going to be having prevention campaigns and efforts, make sure that you ask the community before you embark on these preventive efforts so that you don't make huge mistakes like we did. They know better than us when it comes to prevention, or they have a part of knowledge that we very often don't have, let's put it this way. And finally, the 2 newest concepts in this area, which is the concept of love addiction and sex addiction, that we need to do so much more work before we are fully confident that they are part of the addictive process. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. Do I do the question? Yeah. Okay. So we do have some time for questions, and yeah, we finished on time, and we have a few minutes for questions. So, yes, go ahead.
You mentioned that in treating patients with crystal meth addiction, you had to be aware of sex addiction. Did you find that sex addiction sort of arose from the crystal meth addiction, and what would happen if crystal meth sort of abated?
Yeah. Chicken and the egg situation between the sex addiction and the crystal meth. There are certainly some patients who did not have a problem with sex addiction. They start getting addicted to crystal meth, and that led to sexual addiction. And that is more prominent, I think, in my mind than the other direction, which also kind of somebody with sexual addiction, and as soon as crystal methamphetamine came to town and said, wow, this is the drug I really need. Forget about the ecstasies and the G's and the like. That's what really speaks to me. That we also saw that. But there is very little doubt that you do need treatment for both, and you do need to be informed both from the pharmacological side of crystal meth as well as the more psychosocial aspects of a sex addiction. I'm talking about the pharmacological part of crystal meth because there is such thing as a crystal methamphetamine withdrawal, and you need to be particularly careful with that. I've heard it with my own ears. A patient of mine said, thank you so much for the wonderful SSRI that you are giving me, because now I can use twice as much crystal methamphetamine and I won't feel the effects of the withdrawal, and I can keep on going. So, you know, you just kind of have to titrate your comorbid depressions and anxieties with the use of the drug. And I think that's where addiction psychiatry as a field really is at its best. That's where we come in and can address these kind of questions. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you very, very much. I serve on the New Haven Mayor's Task Force on AIDS, and we've become interested in people over 50. And also there's something called PrEP, which I'm sure you've heard of, in which they're going to give a drug to one group and the other not, and see if that works to prevent AIDS. Now, that leads to the question when I listen to you. Are cases of AIDS found in older people, which are often assumed to be because they were in the control group and not the experimental group, and they didn't get the drug? Also, it could be because they have continued to have sex of the sort you've described.
Yes.
It is seen as beacon
We have seen, certainly in New York, several people over the age of 50 who have seroconverted, and we have traced that back to being high on crystal methamphetamine. And that would be a perfect situation of somebody who has not seroconverted yet, but who's in great danger of seroconverting by having unsafe sex and using crystal methamphetamine, to put them on PrEP. PEP, post-exposure prophylaxis. You had an event of unsafe sex the night before, you go in the morning, very much like the morning after pill for pregnancy. You do have the morning after pill for HIV transmission, and it's called PEP, post-exposure prophylaxis, but much, much more popular and kind of supported by research today is PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, where somebody who has a lifestyle, a behavior that is very risky, and or even not that risky, but it is risky, to put them on pre-exposure prophylaxis. And up until very, very recently, we haven't had a single case of HIV transmission on people who were on PrEP. Now we do have one, but it's still just one case. I just have to say to people who may be a little ambivalent of whether PrEP is a good idea or not, the CDC, which traditionally is a rather conservative organization, is fully in support of PrEP. So if the CDC is fully in support of an intervention like PrEP, that gives me great pause, and if I have to go against that idea, I better have all my ducks in order, and I have to have very, very strong arguments to counteract this guidance that comes from the CDC, which is very clear. So go ahead.
You described an increase in HIV transmission associated with methamphetamine abuse in gay men. Mm-hmm. And you also described an increase in intravenous use of methamphetamine. But you didn't link the two. Mm-hmm. And when you spoke about the increase in HIV transmission, you emphasized reckless sexual behavior. And I wondered, firstly, whether I got that right, and secondly, whether that means, why you think that might be, and whether it reflects the efficacy of needle exchanges and education around needle sharing.
I think it does. And I borrow from the opioid literature that's quite clear that the vast majority of intravenous opioid users who seroconvert with HIV seroconvert through sex, not through dirty needles in 2016. So that we do know, and Wesley Clark often talks about that, and a number of public health officials as well as researchers. So I have no reason to believe that it's not something similar for crystal methamphetamine, especially when the sexual part is so well described of not being very careful with condoms when you are high on crystal methamphetamine. Somehow, as you said, the education, maybe the clean needles, the needle exchange programs have provided people who use intravenously with clean stuff. Go ahead.
You may have mentioned this when you were talking about the public health campaigns. I apologize if I missed it, but to what extent, to what degree is Grindr or other applications coordinating or collaborating with public health initiatives?
The internet has been very collaborative. The manhunt, as I said before, were very, very good. And how this Grindr has not been as good. That's the quick answer to your question. At least from our efforts, it hasn't been responsive. Partnering with the apps and the website has two forms. One is for them to put ads, and they have been very good at that. They put banner ads for treatment programs, for prevention efforts and the like, especially out in San Francisco. They do that without thinking twice about it. It's interesting, in New York, every time you're going to alert the gay community on the dangers of, let's say, sex and drugs, the community immediately cringes, like, oh my God, all these straights are immediately going to think that all we do as gays is sex, 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 sex. And so there's a pushback from our own community in New York not to be so open about the risks of sexual behavior. San Francisco has no problem with that whatsoever. the gay community feels that they own the city, and so if there is some kind of a syphilis comes around, boom, immediately the placards are up and the big billboards, stop doing that, make sure you use your condoms. They have no qualms at all about making this kind of campaigns, not so much in New York. So that's one part, is like all the ads and the banners. The other one is to exclude language. For example, party and play. Party and play was the classic language. Party means I want to do drugs with you. Play means that I want to have sex with you. And so that was filtered out and not allowed. Then the point made very big. If you were to say, what's the point? Or let's get to the point, that all meant intravenous use. So we alerted the websites and the apps on that, and they take that out. But this is a losing game because the language just evolves so fast that they're always ahead of us. Chem-friendly, that was another big part. I want somebody who's chem-friendly. Chem-friendly means that you want to use drugs, quite often crystal methamphetamine. But that's a losing battle. I really think that we cannot be as quick about the language as the apps are. It's meaning you tell me when you need to stop.
Yeah, we can
Oh,
a little more. I think
go ahead.
we're okay.
Terrific talk, thank you so much, a lot to learn. You're so careful not to attribute causality to two things that might correlate, but you were getting us interested, and I think you're interested, so I want to hear more about the idea of interpsychic conflict, when people have a certain combination of gender identity and object choice and all this, and that seems to lead to more substance abuse and trouble. Just more of your thoughts about that.
Okay, you were very careful how you phrased it as well. Let me just let's say a little story on the side, and then I'll try to answer your question. In my medical school, we had a whole week during the OBGYN block on transgender issues. And all the medical students, second-year medical students, got a lot about hormones and surgeries and this and that, everything they were wanting to know about transgender health. And then the next week, it's a psychiatry block, and I go there and I start talking to them, and they just start saying, well, do you think that maybe one of those 16-year-old transgender people may not have been actually transgender? And I say, well, I'm so sure that during your whole week of transgender health, some kind of basic psychiatric differential of the person's troubles would have been addressed. And the medical student said, absolutely not. No, it wasn't. So what I'm saying this story is that political correctness in 2016 has the danger of not allowing us to see some things that are pretty obvious, or even worse, some things that are not quite as obvious. So don't let political correctness de-skill you. Don't let political correctness de-skill you. You have a patient in front of you who says, I'm gay, who says, I am transsexual, who says, I am confused or this or that. Immediately have a differential in your head of personality disorders, of major depressive disorder, of anxiety disorders, of developmental stages, of life transitions, of all the stuff that we've learned in psychiatry to the right and to the left of the chief complaint. I think that probably one of the wisest things that I've ever heard in my residency was that in psychiatry, the chief complaint is nothing more than a dysfunctional solution to a yet unidentified problem. And I think that this is very, very apt for these cases here. So when I have somebody who's in these columns of almost gay but not fully, I file it, I put it up there. Yes, there may be a Kinsey 4 or a Kinsey 2, but they also may be fully straight or fully gay or somewhere in between. I'm openly gay myself. I'm very comfortable in my Kinsey, whatever, and be just and project my own kind of trajectory in life over to my patients. You have to be constantly processing all that. So you have somebody who says that I'm almost gay but not fully, or almost straight but not fully. Have an open mind, have a full differential in your head, work with them psychodynamically, take a step back, don't do it rah, 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 let's roll up our hands and let's kind of move on, so that you can possibly help them kind of make sense out of this world that they live in. Tough one in 2016, and it is a little easier for me as a gay man to be able to say, don't allow political correctness to de-skill you. As a straight person, to deliver this kind of lines, it becomes much trickier. Go ahead. Yeah.
What One of the problems in wanting to see good definitions of sexual addiction and good data for is the derivative stuff that comes from it. In the criminal system, of course, once anybody's accused of any sexual crime, you know, I got an addiction, I'm not responsible, and that kind of stuff.
Or worse, also on the other side, if you have it on your chart that you're a sex addict, that can be detrimental to you, or it can get you off the hook. Both directions, absolutely. Excellent point. Let's not forget the intersection with the criminal justice system and the law. When we wrote the book on the behavioral addictions, we had a big introductory chapter, and pretty much before the book was going to print, we said, let's add a full chapter up front on the legal ramifications of the behavioral addictions, because there are quite a few. All right, thank you so much again. Thanks.